Today's feature, The Future of Housing, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.
I'll start with yourself, Diarmuid. From your experience in the property market, what do you think's changed most dramatically in Clare's housing sector over the last few years?
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of a story of pre and post COVID, Alan. I mean, the market was kind of bumbling along up to about 2019, and then we had COVID, and then you really had quite a dramatic change in the Irish economy following COVID. And change in people's living habits and where they could live. Flexible working came into place. There was definitely more money in the country. So people were a bit more willing to invest, if you like, those two different markets of a coastal holiday market in places like Lahinch and Kilkee, and Doolin and Liscannor, and where people are looking at second homes versus, houses that people actually needed to live in. I suppose really that growth in economy drove people price-wise out of Limerick and Galway and pushed them back in towards Ennis, and people relocating from different parts of the country and the world and moving home, facilitated by flexible working being a big key to it. And that just put a huge pressure on the housing market in Clare, as it has done all over the country. The population of the country has grown. So all of those factors together has just put on the demand side, has put a big pressure on what stock we had available. And then on the flip side of it, we had a very slow, and still have a very slow increase in supply. We are seeing repurposing of housing and investment in existing housing. The challenge we had, I think, pre-COVID is our price base was very much behind what was economical to develop. And unfortunately, with inflation, that pushed that start line further away because the costs of construction, and it's happening again now, as we see these oil prices inflate. That's a worry, because it's going to push the cost of construction up further again. Hopefully not, but unless they get a deal done pretty soon in the Middle East.
So you've given us a kind of overview of the direction of travel over the past number of years, and it seems like we're kind of set on that course for the medium to long term, because you've alluded to the situation in the Middle East. It's hard to see any of that changing anytime soon. And obviously you think of Ennis, and what are we at, about 30,000 population? We're heading towards 40 by 2040. So is the situation only going to get worse?
Well, I suppose my view on it is, the projections are that the town of Ennis will move towards 40,000 people by 2040. So over the next 13, 14 years, that will be up at 40,000 people. But it won't happen if the infrastructure isn't there and the housing isn't there. And what really frustrates me is we have to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place to enable the lands that we have zoned be developed, because otherwise these numbers mean nothing. So you make projections, you make plans towards the future, so that it educates you in terms of what steps you need to take now in order to facilitate that. And if we don't put the money into the infrastructure, and I'm keep saying this, but banging the drum over and over again. But if we don't have the wastewater infrastructure, if we don't have the water infrastructure, and if we don't have the electrical infrastructure, it ain't going to happen. And worryingly, we'll have a town which is ageing. It isn't being refreshed by a younger population, and there's nothing wrong with an ageing population, but you need balance within the population, and give a chance for young people to start their lives in this fabulous town.
And I feel, Diarmuid, like not just with yourself, but anyone I speak to about housing, the word infrastructure is used every third word. And to bring you in, Ciaran, from the builder's perspective, I was going to ask you about the biggest obstacles currently slowing down housing delivery in Clare, but maybe we've alluded to a big reason for that, infrastructure or lack thereof.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Like, there's been no real big investment in infrastructure in Ennis. You've places like Ennis Diamond even, it's maxed out. There's the last development has gone on there at the minute. There'll be nothing else developed there until they can get the infrastructure sorted out. same in Tulla, same in all the small villages and Ennis. Like, there's no real plans. Like, they had a plan for the wastewater in Newmarket down by Bunratty there, but that was shelved. So there's been no big money spent on anything like that around Ennis.
And like, there's often discussion around all, the various issues like materials, cost, labour, planning delays, regulations, etc., etc. Which of these is having the greatest impact on housing affordability at the moment, or are they all doing their utmost?
Material, without a doubt. Like, I got quoted there €180 a metre for concrete. 180. I actually got it for 155 in the end, but before COVID that was €70, and I bought a bag of cement last Friday, and it was €15. That was a fiver before COVID. So on two items, a metre of concrete and one bag of cement, the cost has gone up €100. So you go to every single thing, to a box of nails, everything is nearly doubled to trebled since COVID. So, like, let's say a job you were doing for 60,000 before COVID, like, you're 18 to 100,000 now for the same job. No bells and whistles, just the same exact thing.
Yeah, that's a significant jump. And I wanted to ask you, Diarmuid, about the issues that first-time buyers in Clare are struggling with most at the moment. Maybe pricing, and all of what Ciaran's saying feeds into that. A huge jump there in terms of cost of materials. So obviously, that the person buying the house is going to feel that. Maybe mortgage approval, or even the supply, but also whatever little bit of supply is there. It's a massive list. It's like a queue for U2 tickets or something. Do you know what I mean? The competition for homes is incredible.
Well, I'm not so sure. Certainly it is in the second-hand market, but we just don't have the supply of new private homes to know whether we have
there's not even a supply to have a fight over in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, within the private market, it's very, very limited. And I suppose the challenge is, as Ciaran has pointed out, that cost inflation. I mean, let's bring it back to where this goes, and it really is a fundamental shift in terms of how we as a country think about housing. And what we're willing to accept in terms of housing. And I actually don't think that Irish people are ready for that yet, but they need to get ready for it really quickly.
And when you say that, do you mean that we're still stuck in the kind of like semi-detached house, and be it living in apartments or living in any sort of alternative type of housing, or even the modular homes that we've been talking about recently, in the back gardens and all that, people are reluctant to think outside the box?
If modular homes are a solution, we're in big trouble. Let's put it that way. I'm really coming back down to, like, we have a population where, we're working in Ireland, we're working, I think, at about 2.8 people per unit. Okay, so the European average is down at kind of 2.2, 2.3. Okay, so if our population doesn't grow, we need massive amount more units just to facilitate a decrease in the number of people per unit, because the family unit gets smaller, we'll have fewer people per unit. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is, with cost and with that change in lifestyle and how we operate, we're going to have to accept that we're going to get fewer square metres per person. So that means you're going to have to, the generation to come and the generation after that are going to be more used to and have to become more acceptable of higher density living, which is the kind of living that you have in the continent and pretty much everywhere else. But as a country, we've a very, very dispersed way of living, which it isn't environmentally sustainable. It isn't socially sustainable, and I prefer to live the way we live, but the maths don't add up for all the reasons that Ciaran talked about, to a box of nails, to a bag of cement, to everything else, and the cost of providing the infrastructure and services to do that. So we're going to have to change our mindset in terms of the type of unit we're willing to live in.
I wonder what the builder's perspective is on that, Ciaran, and the kind of people you're dealing with, the kind of clients. Did they strike you as being willing to accept that, or even acknowledge that that's the way things are going?
I would say so. Like the younger people, like I've met loads of people now who they have jobs and they're working away. They've gone to the bank and they've got approved for a 200,000 mortgage. But everything is worth 300,000, 400,000. So they are finished before they even start, if you know what I mean. But if they had an option to get onto a starter home for the 200,000, they would jump at it. They would jump at it just to get just a starter. You know, like you have your starter, your intermediate. You know, like you can go up the ladder. Then, you know, as you get older and maybe accumulate more money or whatever. But like they would take your hand off for a two bedroom bungalow or something like that, and that's where I think it's going, is a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom bungalows, just to make it affordable. But trying to get planning from them then is another issue. Like,
there's problems every direction we look in. So Diarmuid, if, as Ciaran is saying, clearly from what both you're saying, actually just buying a house is very, very difficult, even if you can find one. So there's more and more people are left with little choice but to rent. But one of the major focuses throughout this series has been rental pressures. Are you seeing any signs that the rental market in Clare may stabilise or even perhaps improve, or is demand still far outpacing supply?
Yeah, I mean, the evidence is that it's outpacing supply, and if anything, some of the steps that the government have taken in terms of changing legislation, we've definitely seen an uptick in the number of landlords who've decided, you know, if they're reaching the end of a rental, or they're up, as you understand, there are two systems running in parallel now. There's the pre-March 2026 system and the post-March 2026 system, and a lot of those landlords are saying, look, if we enter a new rental now, we're stuck in that rental for 6 years, albeit we can mark to market in rent. They're saying, look, we're out. So they don't want to lose control of their property for a period of potentially 6 years. So they're stepping away from the market. So we've definitely seen an uptick in terms of landlords leaving the market. And I suppose what we haven't, I mean, a huge amount of coverage went into institutional landlords, the vulture funds as they were called, but now they're back to institutional landlords because we realise that we need them. But they're
any port in a storm.
Well, because they provide the capital to develop the units that is needed to service the market. I mean, that's the reality. And when you switch them off, you switched off the tap for higher density rental homes that people need at a certain point in their lives. Unfortunately, we don't get them in kind of regional counties like Clare. It's more the cities that tend to get those units, so it isn't a solution for us. So we're dependent on the mom and pop landlords, and we're squeezing them out of the market.
Ciaran, from your perspective, what practical changes could local authorities or government bring in that would allow builders to develop more affordable homes more quickly?
As I say, like, you know, the biggest thing at the moment is the price of stuff, the price of material. I don't like VAT. VAT is, I said this before on the programme, that VAT is tied to the price of the material. Maybe the VAT should be per item. So it's X amount of VAT instead of linking it to the price, because when the price goes up, then the VAT shoots up as well. So like it's a windfall for the government, but like it shouldn't be really, like, and maybe just drop the VAT off of all the building material. And all these other taxes on people building houses, and that would stimulate it. Like they would start getting roofs over people's heads, but I don't think they'll do it though. It's too much. It's too lucrative for them at the minute.
Yeah, Diarmuid, it'd be hard for them to let go of that if it is too lucrative.
Well, they don't have VAT on new homes in the UK. But we do, and I think Ciaran's point is well made. Like, it's on a percentage basis, so as the price goes up, the percentage goes up, and it's the end user who's paying for that. So look, you start at the bottom. You start with developable land. So steps have been taken to increase the amount of zoned land in the last few months. So they've effectively opened up the development plans to free up a lot of lands that were in strategic reserve and other lands within the life of the current plan, and that'll come through in the next couple of months. But if it doesn't have infrastructure, it doesn't matter what colour it is on a map. So you need zoned land with infrastructure, and if you have that supply in volume, that'll bring down the price of land. and then you have a changed planning process which is improving. It has gotten better. So then the next block up is you have zone land, then you have a planning system that can get it through planning that doesn't take 5, 6, 7 years. You know what I mean? You're getting into a much better place then. So it all starts with the land at the bottom. If the land is in supply and it has infrastructure, everything else will trickle from that.
Before we finish, is there any other, be it initiative or housing policy, that could make a big, significant difference locally? If so, what would it be and why?
I think I've just said it, to be quite honest.
That is the main one.
It's the main one, because if you have that, it'll all flow from it. If you have the land, you have the infrastructure, you give the developers a chance, they'll do their work and they're good at it. So it flows from that. But then it's down to cost and affordability, as Ciaran said, and how do you build that affordability into it? And that's a challenge then, particularly where your construction costs in a regional county like Clare are just as high as they are in cities where the incomes are higher.
Ciaran, to finish with yourself, if we look ahead 5 to 10 years, what type of housing do you think this county is going to most need? Be it larger family homes, smaller units, social housing, age-friendly housing?
I think smaller units. I think myself that's the way it's going to go, where more affordable, as I say, one bedroom, 2 bedroom bungalows. Probably they'll be all building with the IBS, the insulated board with the concrete inside it. IBS homes, they're becoming very popular. You can get them built quicker. They're a super warm home. No need for block layers. Not there's anything wrong with block layers, but you'll be getting one trade. You'll be getting rid of one trade out of the equation. Just probably all plasters now are using the spray plaster. Just stuff that'll speed it up and reduce the cost of labour. And just get them built, get planning for them, get them built quick. And as Diarmuid was saying, you're going nowhere without the infrastructure. So it's kind of you say you have to start at the bottom and kind of work your way up, which is what Diarmuid was saying is very true.
Well, look, we do have to leave it there, but thanks to both of you for joining us again to finish off this series. Ciaran Breen of Ciaran Breen Construction in Ennis, and from Sherry Fitzgerald McMahon in Ennis, Diarmuid McMahon. Thanks to both of you, lads. Thanks very much.
This feature, The Future of Housing, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.